5 games?
5.
If you're over 500. I mean, if you're the Yankees, you're 15 games over 500. But welcome to another episode of the Home Run Porch Podcast. I'm Kevin.
I'm Madison.
And today we are talking about the real home run record. Now, we agree on this, that the single season home run record is 61.
61.
Now, there's a lot of controversy why 61 is the number. I have the official stats here in front of me because I looked it up, and I didn't realize that Sammy Sosa was on there 3 times. Barry Bonds, 73 in 2001.
Yep.
Number 2 is Mark McGwire, 70 in 98. And 3 is Sammy Sosa, 66 in 98. That was the famous year of where they were chasing each other, much like
much like the Eminem boys.
Yeah, the Eminem, Mantle, and Maris were in 61. So that was 98, and I remember that vividly. What year were you born?
98.
98. So you do not remember that. It was a pretty exciting summer.
Before you find out about the steroids.
Yes. And then number 4 was Mark McGwire. The next year hit 65. Number 5 is Sammy Sosa in 2001, hit 64. And then in 99, so that next year, he hit 63. So he was always behind McGwire those years. And then we hit Roger Maris with 61 in 1961. And then Babe Ruth is with 60 in 1927.
Yeah.
So, the obvious reason why 61 is the number is what?
It's just the fact that they knew what they were doing, right? Mark, Sammy knew that.
Yeah, but I mean, even Barry Bonds in 2001 was so juiced up that his head grew 3 sizes.
So they know that they're taking the steroids, and yet Mark McGwire has the balls, if you will, to thank the Maris family at his press conference. Say Roger was just a great ball player. It's just like, what?
Well, for people listening, we are in Fargo, North Dakota. A lot of people don't know this. Fargo, North Dakota is the hometown of Roger Maris. He was actually born in Hibbing, Minnesota, but he basically grew up in Fargo. If you come to Fargo, go to West Acres Mall. Yeah. There is a museum, a Roger Maris museum in the mall, which is a weird place for a museum. Yeah. It's not huge or anything like that, but it's got all sorts of stuff about him.
Lots of memorabilia, and there's kind of tucked away. There's like stadium seating. Yeah. And there's a nice, documentary that plays, and you can find out about all of his accomplishments, whether it be from, playing at Shanley High or moving to Kansas City Athletics, then Cleveland Indians, and then to the bright lights of the New York City. Yes.
So if you come to Fargo, he's kind of a hero here. I remember when I first moved here in 2013, there was a billboard that said Roger Maris, the real home run king or something like that.
I think those circulate. They'll put them, I think I've seen them before where it's like Roger Maris, 61, the real home run king.
Yeah. Now, arguments against that. The big complaint people made for years before it got obliterated by Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa was that he played a 162-game season and Babe Ruth played a 154-game season. I think that's a legitimate argument.
Agreed.
And Roger Maris hit his 61st home run on the last day of the season, so game 162. He played 161 games that season, so he only sat out 1 game. But here's the interesting thing that sort of argues against that. I looked up the at-bats because I was curious about it. I looked up the at-bats, and Roger Maris had 698 at-bats that season, and Babe Ruth had 691. So that's a wash. That's the same. So 8 games less, but it's a wash there, which tells you that Babe Ruth was surrounded by great players, so he got pitched to almost every time. They couldn't. Luke Gehrig was batting behind him, so they couldn't pitch around him.
Yeah.
But
you could always argue the same thing for that Yankees team too, right?
Yeah.
Roger Maris, you still have to
Mickey
see
Mantle,
Mickey,
that was a great team.
And
way for
but also even like that, I think that 61 season they weren't they traveling more where they'd have to play like a night game and then an afternoon game where back in the day Ruth didn't have to do that. That was a point.
Well, Ruth and them traveled as much, but they didn't have West Coast teams back then. So they were traveling up and down the East Coast, and maybe they came inland a little bit because there was, I think, Kansas City, some of those places, but they weren't going there wasn't all the Los Angeles teams and Seattle and such like that. So, but they were, they were on the train a lot.
Yeah.
So they were traveling. The thing is, I mean, 154 games is a lot.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting little side note. I looked it up. That year, 1961, was the AL played 162 games. That was the first year that they played 162 games. But the NL still played 154 that year. And it wasn't until the next year that the NL also played 162 games, which is just one of those weird sort of anomalies.
That's kind of weird,
yeah. Which is now what they still play. They play 162 games. I think you look at 1 through 6, Barry Bonds, and then Mark McGwire twice, and Sammy Sosa 3 times. All of them on the juice. All of them on steroids.
On the juice.
Yeah. And what angers me, I had a kid years ago. I was arguing with a kid. This actually was right around the time Barry Bonds set the record. Or when the scandal broke, which is probably 2004 maybe.
Yeah.
When the hearings and everything went crazy and everybody was mad and stuff. He said, well, you still have to be able to turn on the pitch. You still got to be able to hit and all these things. I agree with all of that. But the difference with the steroids, what I argued with the kid, the equivalent would be like, okay, when Barry Bonds comes up, we're going to take the fence and we're going to pull it in 20 feet. And then when Roger Maris comes up, we're going to push the fence back out.
Right.
Well, you would right away, you'd look at that and you go, well, that's garbage. That's cheating. That's not fair.
Yep.
And that's the difference that steroids makes. You're just stronger. Yes. What did he hit? I forget what he is. Is he 755 or whatever it is? His final tally was.
Yeah.
Would he have hit a lot of home runs? I don't know if he would have got to 700. He was a 7-time All-Star. Yep. He was an All-Star many times before he started doing steroids. He certainly was a Hall of Famer and a great player. Well, he's not in the Hall of Fame now because of that. Do I think he'll eventually get in? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of other people that have cheated that are in the Hall of Fame. I don't know. I don't know how that's ever going to be resolved. I actually wrote a email to George Will, the political writer, but also the baseball writer one time, asking him his opinion. And he sent back an email, actually, and just, he said, you just have to know how to read the record book. Well, that was a sort of an unsatisfactory answer to me.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that was going on now, and it's very clear and that those players were doing it. It's frustrating because of that. One time somebody compared it to the Tour de France racing, and Bill Burr, the comedian, said one time, he said, well, the difference was everybody was on the juice in the Tour de France. He goes, our guy, Lance Armstrong, who was on the juice, just beat all your guys who were also on the juice. Yeah. But there were guys that weren't doing that. And it's frustrating to know that a player did that. And it was the sad thing is you weren't alive or you weren't aware of it at that time, but there was kind of a wink and a nod thing. I think the casual fan didn't know. Obviously, the players were getting bigger and they were more muscular, that sort of thing. And that has changed. I mean, you have players that are much more muscular. I mean, Babe Ruth had a pot belly. And, and his bat, do you know how heavy his bat was? 54 ounces.
Jeez.
So you're a big guy, but when you batted, you probably had a 33-ounce bat, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. No. I mean, 54 ounces is like a log. It's huge.
You try to just get it off your shoulder.
Yeah.
Right?
And he was so strong, and that obviously made a difference in how far he could hit it because he's swinging such a big thing. But I don't know.
What about with since we're talking about Ruth and Maris? Do you think there's an asterisk?
That used to be an argument. That was an argument since 1961 and stuff like that. I think the asterisk is a little bit ridiculous. I think you certainly can talk about it and say, well, he played more games. He played 8 more games, and that's a valid point. But
is it that many games enough to?
Well, if you're hitting a home run once every 2.5 games, yeah, certainly it's enough to, get those extra home runs. It's interesting because now you see players get in the 50s. I saw somebody the other day, they were saying, oh, at this pace, he'll hit 96 home runs. And you just like, okay, that's garbage. It's garbage because when they hit August, your body just broke down, you're tired, it's hot. There's no way you can sustain that. So I never I just kind of.
What about if Mickey would have stayed healthy and not had that, infection in his hip? Do you think?
Do you know how many games he missed? I know he went on. He didn't finish the season, but was it?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how many, but it had to have been.
It's obvious.
So I think Mantle was at 53 and Maris was at 56 when he went out.
Yeah.
So maybe a couple.
Well, he had 54. He got 54 for the season. Here's the thing. Here's the thing I think about that.
By mid-September,
Mantle was the better home run hitter. Maris never hit anywhere near that again. I think he was the highest he got was like 33 or something like that in the year before and the year after. So did he catch lightning in a bottle? Yeah, probably. But Mantle was consistently in the 40s and 50s. He was definitely a better home run hitter, but he lived a different kind of life. He was broken down. He abused his body, that sort of thing. He was a switch hitter, all these things. So
I also wanted to say this quote after Roger hit it in the press conference after. Also late in the season, Maris began losing his hair.
Yeah,
because of the stress.
The stress, yeah.
And so here's what he says. He says, as a ball player, I would be delighted to do it again. As an individual, I doubt if I could possibly go through it again.
Yeah.
Which is even when. Like we talked about before, he coming over from Cleveland, he's a small town Midwestern guy.
Yeah.
The bright lights,
quiet.
They still to this day, New York is a bright place, hard to perform. If you don't perform, literally everyone is going to tell you about it, And so I think it was hard for him to deal with that, especially as a guy who would be okay and with saying 4 words to the press and that being it, but same with the media now. You don't want a guy who gives you 4 words, but at some point it's
I think, I agree with you. He's got that Midwestern stoicism, but Mickey was from Oklahoma. So it wasn't like he grew up in New York City or Philadelphia or one of those. Obviously he took to it better than.
Well, it was Mickey's lifestyle too, right?
Exactly.
Going out, partying,
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing to me that Roger was able to hold it together with the stress and losing his hair. And, there are people, let's be honest, there are people that didn't want him to break Ruth's record because Ruth is on Mount Rushmore of baseball.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that there were people that felt that way considering he was playing for the Yankees.
Yeah.
So there were Yankee fans that didn't want this Yankee player to do that. I mean, that.
Yeah.
That kind of bugs
I think
me.
if Mantle wasn't there, if there wasn't this 2-man battle, it's everyone's behind Roger. I feel like,
yeah.
But I think everyone was mad that Mickey ended up getting hurt.
Yep.
They couldn't cheer for him, and so they may be happy he hit 61, but they were like, "You're not you weren't the one that we wanted."
Yeah,
and that's also hard to deal with as a person. I'd feel like,
Yeah, I mean, I it's an interesting legacy to have because it's one of those numbers in baseball. Baseball is all about numbers, which is one of the things that people like about it. So if you say 56, people know that you're talking about the consecutive game hitting streak. If you say 61, it's Roger Maris's home runs. If you say 406, that was the batting average of Ted Williams in 1941. The numbers are magical in baseball.
Yeah.
And 60 was magical for a long time, and then 61 was magical for 30-some years. But you notice no one ever says 73.
Right, yeah.
They don't. Yeah. It just feels like there was a 10-year period where baseball numbers were inflated, and so we're not gonna spend the energy to honor those numbers.
It's just we remember Roger and Mickey, and I only know Mark McGwire because of this.
Yeah.
I only know him because of the tarnish, the whatever you want to call it. Same thing with Sammy Sosa and Barry. It's just I know their names because I know Roger's story and Mickey's story. And so 1984, the Yankees retire Maris's number, and then a year later he dies.
He dies of cancer,
unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Mickey lived longer till 1995. So
yeah,
I think he was able to, live out some of Roger's,
We'll talk. We'll do a podcast on Mickey's book, The Mick, which is fantastic. Okay. Oh, it's a great book. If you're into baseball biographies, that's a great one. Yeah, and Mickey was the first one to admit that he abused his body and could have played longer and probably would have lived longer. Definitely would have lived longer too.
But yeah, that's 61, and let us know if you agree, disagree. We'd love to hear if you disagreed. I think it'd be fun to see you. So if you want to comment on this,
I'd be curious. I'd be curious to see if there's any people out there listening that would argue hardcore for 73.
Yeah. So this is the Home Run Porch Podcast. I'm Madison.
And I'm Kevin.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening.